A 20-year-old student went home in her car and disappeared without a trace. At first, it was extremely difficult for the police to investigate the case. However, with each passing day, they became convinced that the solution had been right in front of them all along. Nott was born on February 11, 1966 in California. Her family, which included 4 children, lived in a suburb of San Diego called Cajon. After high school, Kara decided she wanted to become a teacher, so she enrolled at the University of San Diego. She continued living with her parents, and it took her about 20 minutes to drive to campus. For her 20th birthday, her father gave Kara the car she had long dreamed of, a white 1968 Volkswagen Beetle. She also worked part-time at the local zoo, donating her earnings to help injured animals. In addition, Kara worked at a small health food store. It seemed that her life was shaping up as well as it could, with a bright future ahead. During the New Year's holidays, she spent a lot of time with friends and family, and regularly visited her boyfriend Wayne. He lived 50 kilometers away from her in a small town called Escondido. On the morning of December 27, 1986, Kara decided to spend the whole day with him since he was sick and needed care. She stayed at his house until 8 in the evening, after which she called her father and said she was about to head home. Her journey was supposed to take no more than an hour, but as night approached, Kara still hadn't arrived. Her father began to worry. At first, he called her boyfriend, thinking that Kara might have stayed there. However, the young man said that she had left almost immediately after calling home. After waiting a few hours, her parents decided to go out looking for their daughter. There were 2 roads from Wayne's house to Cajon, so the parents decided to split up. After some time, Kara's older sisters and brother joined the search. They spent the entire night checking the roads Kara would have traveled. At one point, her father decided to contact the police, but they refused to take his report. Since Kara was 20 years old at the time, they had to wait 24 hours from the time of her disappearance before they could file a report with the police. Therefore, the family continued the search on their own, and by morning they made a troubling discovery. One of Kara's sisters, along with her husband, decided to turn off the highway and drive along it, as the family had already inspected the main roads several times. After driving for a few minutes on a country road, they noticed a parked white car in the distance. It was Kara's Volkswagen. The doors were open, the windows were down, her purse was inside, and the keys were in the ignition, but Kara was nowhere to be found. Then her sister contacted the relatives and the police, who this time accepted the report and came to the scene. While some detectives examined the car, others searched the area for the missing girl. One of the officers walked down the road to an old bridge and noticed someone's body in the bushes beneath it. Upon descending, he realized it was Kara Nott. Her relatives, who were nearby at the time, identified the girl. They had hoped until the last moment that they would find Kara alive. However, the reality was far more tragic. The police could not find any substantial evidence at the crime scene. The only thing they managed to discover were tire tracks on the bridge that were wider than those of Kara's Volkswagen. Medical experts examined the body and concluded that the girl had received several blows to the head and had been strangled. There were no signs of sexual violence, making the killer's motive completely unclear. Nothing was missing from her car, including her wallet and documents. Detectives began to reconstruct the events of that evening. They established that Kara left her boyfriend's house around 8:30 p.m. From a receipt found in her car, they determined that the girl had stopped at a gas station close to where her body was later found. Unfortunately, the complete lack of clues did not allow the investigators to determine why Kara had turned off the highway onto the abandoned bridge. The first suspect in the case was her boyfriend, Wayne. He was the last person to see Kara that evening, but the young man claimed that he was home all night. When he learned that Kara had not returned home and her family was searching for her, he also decided to join the search. His sister confirmed that he left home late at night. The police, however, believe that the girl was killed between 9 and 10 p.m. The next suspect was Wayne's father. He owned the health food store where Kara worked part-time. There were also no clues against him. However, the police noticed several odd things. First, they thought it was strange how upset the man was at Kara's funeral, considering he wasn't even a relative. Second, he had a reputation for flirting with all the girls indiscriminately. Another lead came from a witness. The police were informed that a gold Cadillac with a blonde woman in the front seat was seen in the place where Kara's body was found. Wayne's father owned such a car. The police decided to question him, but the man denied any involvement in the murder. As proof, he provided call data showing that at the time of Kara's death, he was more than an hour's drive from the location. This was enough to clear him of suspicion. In the absence of other suspects, detectives decided to turn to the public. Kara's story was actively covered on television and radio, so the police asked people to report any oddities or suspicious things they might have noticed on the day of the murder. Furthermore, a local TV channel decided to produce a show dedicated to road safety. Together with the police department, they informed viewers about the dangers that could await people on highways and how to behave in a critical situation. After this broadcast, the police received about 300 calls from people sharing various leads on Kara's case. However, detectives quickly noticed that some of the reports were overlapping. Several dozen women reported experiencing something strange near the location where the girl's body was found. All of them mentioned being stopped on that highway by patrol officer Craig Peyer. His behavior was highly questionable. Some women assured that after being stopped, he would start conversations on personal topics, gradually moving to questions of an intimate and vulgar nature. These conversations could last from several tens of minutes to a couple of hours, and sometimes the officer even sat in the passenger seat next to the girls. All this occurred only when they were driving alone. But the most suspicious discovery awaited the detectives. Several women reported that Peyer asked them to pull off the highway onto the same road where Kara's car was found. Sometimes he also allowed himself to touch the women. Some of them reported that during the conversation, he began to stroke their hair and shoulders. All these reports were enough for the detectives to start seriously considering their colleague as a suspect. However, his biography looked almost impeccable. The 38-year-old Vietnam veteran had been working in the patrol service for 13 years and was highly regarded, married, and had 2 children. Colleagues spoke of him as a professional, often becoming a model employee by many standards. But as detectives dug deeper, they discovered the first alarming signals. It turned out that Peyer had repeatedly received complaints from women he stopped for no reason and behaved inappropriately with. However, all these complaints led to no action. The management referred to the officer's impeccable reputation and concluded that he did not exceed his official powers. Following this, detectives noticed something else. Peyer participated in the filming of the road safety show, which aired several days after Kara's murder. Reporters rode in the patrol car with him and took an interview. The footage showed fresh scratches on the man's face. According to regulations, he was required to report the origin of these injuries in his end-of-shift report. It turned out that the scars appeared on the day of Kara's murder, and his explanation in the report sounded very strange. According to him, he arrived at the police station to refuel the car. He accidentally spilled gasoline, slipped on it, and fell face first onto a fence with barbed wire. Following this, detectives decided to look at Peyer's work card, which he was supposed to fill out every shift. It included data about stopping a driver, including the exact time. On the car for December 27, they immediately noticed something strange. One line had clearly been erased, and in its place were details of a driver being stopped at 9:30 p.m., exactly when Kara was presumed to have been killed. This could indicate that Peyer had intentionally altered the card to create an alibi for himself. Upon closer inspection of the card, detectives found that the original entry for that line had been 10:30 p.m. With all this information, detectives decided to inspect his patrol car. First, the tire size matched exactly with the tracks found on the abandoned bridge. Second, in the trunk under the spare tire, they found a piece of rope, which was sent to an expert. Comparing it with the marks on Kara's neck, they concluded that this rope could have been the murder weapon. With this evidence in hand, detectives decided to interrogate Peyer for the first time. He denied any involvement and stated that at the time of the murder, he was several kilometers away, issuing a ticket to another driver. He also voluntarily gave the detectives his uniform, which he wore that evening. Unfortunately, they did not have a DNA sample from the killer, and even if they had, they would not have been able to analyze it at that time. However, the examination of the uniform bore fruit. Tiny particles of gold fabric were found on Kara's clothes. Peyer's uniform had patches of exactly the same color, which were sent to the lab. Experts determined that the particles on Kara's clothing completely matched the fabric of the patches. The detectives found another clue, but this time in the opposite direction. Particles of purple fabric were found on Peyer's uniform and shoes, matching the material of Kara's pants. Upon closer examination of the girl's clothes, experts found a small drop of blood on her shoes. They could not perform DNA analysis, but it was established that the blood belonged to the rare O-negative blood group. Kara had a different blood group, while Peyer had exactly that one. Detectives speculated that the blood might have gotten on the victim's shoe after she scratched her killer's face. Thanks to the data on Peyer's card, investigators found the driver who he allegedly issued a ticket to at the same time Kara was killed. The man stated that the officer stopped him around 10:30 p.m. and corrected the time on the card several times in his presence. As detectives were working through all this data, new witnesses continued to come forward. One of them stated that he saw Kara at a gas station on the evening of her death, just a few kilometers from where she died. According to him, the girl turned off the highway onto a country road, followed by a patrol police car. As soon as Peyer's colleagues became aware of the suspicions against him, they shared their observations with the detectives. The man showed a heightened interest in the case and constantly asked everyone if they knew any new details. He also mentioned that the murderer shouldn't be blamed for the incident, as it could have been an accident. However, the most chilling story came from a colleague who had recently joined the service. She recounted that, long before these events, Peyer had taken her to the very bridge under which Kara's car was found, stating it was the perfect place to dispose of a body. The detectives also spoke with the duty officer working at the station on the day of Kara's murder. According to him, when Peyer arrived to refuel his car, he already had fresh scratches on his face, contradicting his story of falling onto a fence. His colleagues also stated that such an event was impossible. Peyer's parking spot was 3 meters away from the fence, and the barbed wire was above the level of his head. Despite these clues being circumstantial in legal terms, detectives still arrested Peyer on January 17, 1987. He continued to proclaim his innocence, so the case went to trial. Peyer's lawyer insisted that all these circumstantial clues in no way indicated his client's guilt. He highlighted the man's impeccable reputation, long service in the police, and achievements in his position. However, the prosecution argued that the amount of circumstantial evidence collectively provided irrefutable proof of his guilt. Peyer had intentionally forged his own work card to hide his absence from duty. He lied about how he got the scratches on the night of Kara's death, and nearly 30 women accused him of inappropriate behavior. Due to the lack of direct evidence, the court process proved to be very difficult. The jurors could not reach a decision for an entire week, and eventually their opinions were divided. This led the judge to declare the process inconclusive and schedule a new trial. At the second trial, a new prosecutor was appointed, who managed to dismantle many of Peyer's lawyers' arguments. Some of his colleagues testified in court, initially stating they saw him fall on the fence. However, under the prosecutor's pressure, they all admitted that they were not actually there and had merely repeated the story told by Peyer. Following the new trial, the jury found him guilty of murder, and the man was sentenced to 25 years to life. Since then, Peyer has filed multiple appeals, each of which has been rejected. But in 2004, something strange happened. He was offered the chance to prove his innocence through DNA analysis, which had become actively used by then. Experts could compare his sample with the blood found on Kara's shoe, and here Peyer, who continued to insist on his innocence, simply refused without explaining why. After that, few doubted that he was indeed the killer. Most likely the man understood that this would conclusively prove his guilt, yet he continued to file for parole, which was successfully rejected. Currently, he will be able to file a new petition only in 2027, when he will be 77 years old. Kara's family made significant efforts to ensure her death was not in vain. They achieved changes in several laws and established university scholarships in her name. Kara's father also sued the state government for allowing such a dangerous person to work in the police. He won the case and received compensation of $2.7 million. After that, he ensured that a nature reserve was created on the abandoned land next to the site of his daughter's death. It was named in memory of Kara and other victims of crime. Unfortunately, the girl's father died of a heart attack while visiting this reserve in 2000. Thus, in this complex case, despite the lack of substantial evidence, Peyer's guilt is evident. He had a chance to be freed by providing his DNA sample for comparison. His refusal only convinced everyone that he was indeed the murderer.